Okay, so on variables like socioeconomic status, you can see that the higher you go, the higher the socioeconomic status. Both of these variables are socioeconomic status. But then there's variables like race. And if we look at that 5, 2, 7, 3, 4, first of all, we need to get a handle on what that means. So I'm going to open up the code book here, do a search for by race. Notice this is not the one I'm looking for. Here we go. So the name by race, if I was actually choosing this as a variable, I'd want to read through the details about how race is categorized, but I'm going to jump to the actually labeling here. So this first student right here is a Hispanic, where they specified the race. The second student is a Asian, Hawaiian, Pacific Islander, or a non-Hispanic, one of those. 7 is white, non-Hispanic, and so on. So clearly, the higher we get, it's not that we get more of some quality, like race quality or something. It's just arbitrary numbering. You could switch these numbers around as long as you switched them on the chart too, and it wouldn't change a thing, right? So what do we do with this if we run a regression? Now, to run a regression, we need the numbers to be in a meaningful order. If we only have 2 categories, we're actually fine, because in a weird way, it is meaningful either direction we go. For example, the male-females that we saw. Males was 1, females was 2. 2 categories. The lower I get, the more male I get. The higher I get, the more female I get. So in a weird way, it works out if we only have 2 categories. But it doesn't work if we have 3 or more categories, if the categories are not in some kind of increasing or decreasing order like we have here. So here we have to use some creativity. One thing we could do is change this. We basically have to change it into a yes/no variable if we want to use it in this regression. So we could say white and non-white. We could say maybe Hispanic and non-Hispanic. And let me do that one actually, because I like how that will combine 2 of these categories. So we want to reclassify this into a new variable, basically. Let's call it Hispanic. And if the student has a 4 or a 5, we want them to get, let's say, a 1 on this Hispanic variable. If they're anything else, we want them to get a 0, unless they're missing data. So I'd first want to get my missing data out of this column, just delete all of that out there. But once I've done that, let me show you a real quick way to do this here. Okay, all you have to do is, if it's a 5, put a 1. If it's a 2, put a 0. A 7 would be a 0. And you just do that 16,000 times, and it's really simple. Just kidding. So we can use a formula, and this is the formula we're going to use. So I'm going to use an if statement, and it's a little bit confusing because I have 2 different values I'm working with. But basically what I want to say is, if this value is either 4, or if this value is 5, in either case, I want to give it a 1. If that's not true, I want to give it a 0. So just to go over that again, so I'm using an if statement. An if statement basically sets something up so that one thing happens if this value is a certain value, another thing happens if it's a different value. So if this value right here would be either a 4 or a 5, then my Hispanic value is a 1. Otherwise, if this value is anything other than a 4 or 5, I'm going to give this Hispanic value a 0. Okay, and we can see now, if I just drag this formula down a little bit, we can see that the people here who got 4s were classified as a 1, and apparently I can't just take that down, so maybe I did. It just took a little while to do it. Now notice here I do still have the missing data, and let me show you how a quick way to get rid of those while I'm at it. But notice the 5s and the 4s are both classified 1s. Everything else is 0. And now I can use this as my predictor variable, so it's whether the student was Hispanic or not, for whatever my outcome variable is. So let me show you how to get rid of that missing data here. What I could do is freeze the top row, and that way when I sort, it's not going to mess these up. And then I'm going to sort by race. So let's sort it lowest to highest. It will take a few seconds because we're dealing with a large amount of data. But now I can see that all these -8s and 4s, which over here are the only categories of missing data for this variable. Hold down Shift key, select all of those at once, right click, delete those rows, bam. Okay, so now I've gotten rid of all my missing data on the race variable, and I've reclassified. Notice another quick trick would be if you sorted by race, you could easily just give a 0, fill down until you got to the 4s and 5s, put a 1 in, fill down until you got to the end of the 5s, and then a 0 the rest of the way. That would be another creative way to go around that use of the formula. If you don't know how to do the formula, do what I do and just Google it, and it's usually going to give you a nice step-by-step. Even if it's in Excel, the commands are pretty much the same. So just to recap here, we've changed a categorical variable into a numerical or quantitative variable that we can now use in the regression.